What's going on, congregation? It's the Motor Minister, Armany, and welcome to another episode of the Motorsport Ministry, the home for all the latest hot takes going on in the racing world. And we got a lot to discuss going on just this past weekend. We're going to be talking about Garage 56. We're going to be talking about Charles Leclerc in Formula One. He's starting to get a little bit of disrespect. We'll jump into that later on. And then we'll be talking about, which has kind of been going on in the background, but something that I've been noticing, and that is Andretti Autosport kind of having a little bit of a downfall? We're going to discuss all that in today's episode. So without any further ado, let's begin. All right, let's start off with this. So if there's one thing that us fans, I've been accused of this as well, I've been guilty of this as well, we need to learn to not necessarily overhype things, if you will. Because then we overhype something, and then when they don't meet that expectations, we're quick to label that a disappointment or a bust when no, we just gave it unrealistic expectations, really. Like, for example, AJ Allmendinger. Everyone last year, when it was announced he would go full-time cup racing this year, they were basically giving him a playoff lock. And then I came out, I said, you're really going to put AJ in the same conversation as Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin, and Kyle Larson in terms of being a lock for the playoffs. And here he is 20th in points, and now everyone's saying he's been a disappointment. No, he hasn't been. Y'all just gave him unrealistic expectations, and then when he doesn't meet them, that's not his fault. So we need to be careful with that as fans, in my opinion. But because, like I mentioned, we deem the overhyped as disappointing when they don't meet our expectations. But what if they're not warranted, or they are warranted, all the hype that they get? And, let's say they meet some expectations, but not all the expectations. Let's say that. And I personally believe that Charles Leclerc fits this category perfectly. He's a driver that has a lot of hype. And I think it's fair to say he hasn't met all the expectations and all the hype. But really, especially after Le Mans with Antonio Giovinazzi winning the 24 Hours of Le Mans with Ferrari, there are some people out there who've come out and said that Leclerc has done nothing for Ferrari. And you got guys like Ericsson and Giovinazzi who have accomplished more in racing than Leclerc, which we'll get to that in a second. But let's talk about Charles Leclerc for a second because, I mentioned it before. I'm not a big Leclerc guy, personally. I think he's talented, but I wouldn't put him on the pedestal of Max and Lewis. At least I wouldn't personally. But let's talk about Leclerc for a second. I'm going to talk about him in two ways. I'm going to mention the issues because I do believe there's a lot of issues. And I'm also going to back him up a little bit before I give you guys my overall opinion. So number one, let's mention the issues. And this is the real reason why I don't think Leclerc is a top-tier driver. With Formula One, I think there's a couple tiers of drivers. I think the top tier, the cream of the crop, where everyone is, trying to get to, I think there's only three drivers. Max Verstappen, the winner of the last two F1 championships, Lewis Hamilton, statistically the greatest F1 driver of all time, and Fernando Alonso, who looks just as good in his 40s as he did in his prime with Renault and Ferrari. I think those three are the cream of the crop. They are the best that Formula One has to offer, again, for all different reasons. Then there's the second tier, and that's the tier I would put Leclerc in. And the reason I don't put Leclerc in the top tier, because there's a lot of people that will put Leclerc in that top tier. I wouldn't personally. And the fact of the matter is that Leclerc makes too many mistakes. He's too accident prone. I mean, how many times, his rookie year, he makes mistakes. He's a rookie. Cut him some slack. His second year, he makes mistakes. First year of Ferrari, new team, cut him some slack. Then he gets to 2020. He still makes mistakes in 2020. 2021, he makes mistakes then. 2022, he makes mistakes. He's just a driver that has a couple mistakes in him. You can't be a top-tier driver, in my opinion, and have constantly making mistakes this season. I mean, when it's almost guaranteed that Leclerc's going to make one or two big mistakes a year, that's not top tier, in my opinion. You don't see Lewis making that. You don't see Max making that. You don't see Fernando making that. So you can't be a top tier driver when you have a mistake or two basically guaranteed in you every single year. That's why I don't put Leclerc in that category. Now, I would put Leclerc in that second category, and I think he leads the second category. And I would put drivers like George Russell and Lando Norris in that category as well. Very, very good drivers. They have the potential to be champions, but there's something holding them back. Russell, he's still got something to learn in terms of his racecraft and a little bit of his qualifying. Lando, he's just stuck in a midfield car. We haven't seen what he could do in top level machinery. And Leclerc, like I mentioned, he's too accident prone. Those are the big things with Leclerc. But folks, really, besides that, I mean, Leclerc is basically the complete package. And to the people who say he's been a disappointment, I mean, let's just look at Charles Leclerc's stats, because I have his stats written right here. And let me tell you, some people aren't going to like this, the Leclerc haters. So in 110 starts, he has 5 wins, 26 trips to the podium, 20 poles, and a best finish of second in the standings in 2022. Now, he's only had 2 seasons with 10 plus podiums in said seasons, but those were the seasons where Ferrari actually gave him a capable car of competing for wins and podiums. And we all know in Formula One, if you don't have the car, you're not going to do anything. Just look at Lewis Hamilton last year. Now, his best average finish is a 5.3, which is a 2022, which is only 0.1 better than Perez and Russell. So, but again, that's where the accident prone comes in. You could see that a little bit in the average finish. However, his average finish wasn't that far off of Max's. Max's average finish last year was a 3.7, and he won 15 races last year. Leclerc winning 12 less races was still less than 2 positions shy of Max's average finish. He wasn't that far behind. Again, the mistakes, and on top of that, Red Bull just got better in development than Ferrari, but Leclerc really wasn't that far behind Max. I mean, there's a reason Leclerc finished ahead of Sergio, who was in arguably the superior car all year. So, to those people who act like Leclerc has done nothing, I mean, let's tackle that right now as a matter of fact. I guarantee you a lot of the people who say that Leclerc's done nothing with Ferrari compared to Marcus Ericsson, who used to drive for Alfa Romeo, which is a Ferrari satellite team in F1, and was Leclerc's teammate, or, in terms of, Antonio Giovinazzi, who I don't know why people are acting like he was underrated. He couldn't even beat 40-year-old Kimi Räikkönen when he was out of his prime. So, no, he's not underrated. But they're acting like they've accomplished more than Leclerc. I'm going to say this. I guarantee you there is a lot of drivers that would take 5 F1 wins over a 24-hour Le Mans win. Overall win. I guarantee you that. Number one, not just because it's only 1 win compared to 5, but keep in mind, that 1 win is considered one of the 3 crown jewels in motorsport. Something that only 1 driver in the history of auto racing has been able to accomplish. And I guarantee you a lot of drivers would still take the 5 F1 wins that Leclerc has over the 24-hour Le Mans win. I would. Now let's talk about the Indianapolis 500 with Marcus Ericsson, which really should be 2, but I've already discussed that in the past. I personally would rather have the Indy 500 win over Leclerc's 5 wins. But I guarantee you, there's still a decent chunk of drivers out there that would still take the 5 wins. Why do I say that? Because Formula One is considered the pinnacle of motorsport. Maybe not in terms of talent, but definitely in terms of getting a seat. There's only 20, and let alone to get one of the seats that's capable of competing for wins is even harder. And Leclerc has that. And he's produced with it. He's produced more with it than Carlos Sainz. He produced more with it than Sebastian Vettel when they were teammates. And Vettel's one of the greatest F1 drivers of all time. He's produced more in F1 than when he was teammates with Marcus Ericsson and Alfa Romeo. And people want to now act like Ericsson's done more than Leclerc in motorsport. I would still take the 500 win over the 5 wins because I just think the Indy 500 is that special But there's a good chunk of people out there who would take the 5 wins over one Indianapolis 500, even though I'm personally not one of them. So to the people out there who say that Leclerc has done absolutely nothing and he's basically been a disappointment, how? Has he fully lived up to the hype? I wouldn't agree. I would agree he hasn't. Because again, he's got too many accidents in him. But if you take out the accidents, if Leclerc could just find a way, maybe he needs a new driving coach or just needs to figure it out mentally. If he could just take that out of him, I think he could get to that top tier where Max, Lewis, and Fernando are. I think he's very close. But he's got to get rid of the mistakes. If he does, because folks, he's quick. He's arguably the quickest driver on the F1 grid. I mean, he's had 20 poles since 2019 for a reason. I believe that's the most poles out of anyone on the F1 grid, if not very close. He's got 5 wins, which, again, he won more races than his teammate last year. He won more races than both Mercedes drivers combined last year. He won more races than Sergio Perez last year. So he's got the talent. He's got it. And he's not been a disappointment. Now, what are my overall opinions on Leclerc? Because I mentioned that I think he's a little bit overhyped. And only because I don't think he's in that top tier, like some people believe he is. I think he's in that second tier, and until he can fix a mistake issue, I think he's going to stay in that second tier. Now, that can be fixed, and that can be fixed with time. Until then, I would put him in that second tier, but he's well and above. He's well clear of Lando, in my opinion, and he's well clear of Russell, in my opinion. But do I think he's a little bit overhyped? Absolutely, I do. But do I think he's a disappointment? No. And it's disappointment in a different way. He's not a disappointment in the sense of I think people overhyped him and he's not living to expectations like an AJ Allmendinger kind of sense this year in the NASCAR side of things. So in that sense, you can argue he's been a tad disappointing because he really hasn't done much. But then again, we all know what Formula One is. If you don't have the car to compete, you're not going anywhere. That's just the fact of the matter. And Leclerc really hasn't had that. He's only had that for half a season. And for the most part, he was pretty close to Max when he had that. So do I think he's been a disappointment? No. Do I think he's lived up to expectations completely? Not exactly. But to say he's been a disappointment, to say that guys like Giovinazzi and Ericsson have done way more than Leclerc, that's just ridiculous. I guarantee you a lot of drivers would rather have the 5 F1 wins than the Le Mans win. I guarantee you Giovinazzi would rather have that, and he just won Le Mans. You can make an argument that the Indy 500 win is more impressive and more important than the 5 F1 wins. I certainly would make that argument, but there's a lot of people out there that would say otherwise. So because of all that, from everything that I said, I don't think Leclerc's been a disappointment. And to the people who say that he has been a disappointment, to the level of saying that Giovinazzi and Ericsson have done more than him, I think they're just completely ridiculous. Leclerc's been far from a disappointment. There's been far more disappointing drivers than Leclerc. And honestly, he's probably the 4th best driver on the F1 grid. And there are a lot of drivers out there that would kill to be the 4th best driver on the Formula One grid. Good stuff. I actually really enjoyed that segment. So let's start off with another segment here. And I want to open up this by talking about, we all heard well documented about the Stewart-Haas Racing downfall on the NASCAR side of things. How they went from championship contenders having half of the round of 8 consisting of all 4 of their cars just 5 years ago to now they're, 3 of their cars are out or would kill just to be in the top 20 points. It's been a downhill on top of a downhill for SHR the past 5 years. But what if I told you that there is the possibility that we're in the midst of another downfall similar for another super team on the IndyCar side of things? And this is a team that really has been slowly going downhill since 2019. And really, you can argue since 2018. A team that's went from title contenders to race win contenders to the odd podium here and there. And really, not a lot of people have been talking about it, something that I've noticed. And if you guys don't know what team I'm talking about, it's Andretti Autosport. You may not have noticed it because, again, no one's talked about it. But, folks, Andretti's kind of been falling off a cliff. Slowly, though. It hasn't been like Stewart Haas, where it's kind of just been one season they're contenders, and the next season they're just nowhere. It's been a slow downhill, really, for the past 4 to 5 seasons. And really, 2018 was the peak. You know, you had Alexander Rossi winning multiple races a year, leading the points in multiple times throughout the season. Ryan Hunter-Reay was winning multiple races. And Marco Andretti looked more consistent. 2018 was really the peak of Andretti Autosport, really throughout the past half decade. So what has happened since then? I am now going to document from 2019 to now the downfall of Andretti Autosport. I'm going to put in some context and put the numbers together. So let's start off with the 2019 season, and we're just going to go over all the stats, the entire team as a whole. So 2019, they managed to win 2 races. Both were by Alexander Rossi. And if you want to count the Harding-Steinbrother team, which was an Andretti affiliate, like a satellite Andretti team, which was Colton Herta in the 88 car, then they won 4 races. So 2 by Rossi and 2 by Herta. And they finished P3 and P8 in points. And if you want to count the Harding-Steinbrother team again, they finished 7th in points as well. So if we're counting all 5 teams, and I'm going to count the 88 car, 3 out of their 5 cars finished top 10 in points. And their best car finished 3rd in points, only 33 points behind the eventual champion that year, Joseph Newgarden. Not bad. Now let's move on to 2020. 2020, it was a weird year, pandemic, all that nonsense. So you can semi-say it was an outlier. But there's still something to note here. 2020, they only managed to win 1 race. That was with Colton Herta. They still had 3 drivers finish top 10 in points, P3, P9, and P10 to the points, respectively. However, first year Rossi went winless. Ryan Hunter-Reay couldn't win a race for the 2nd consecutive year, and I don't even think he finished on the podium that year. But most importantly, yes, Herta finished 3rd in the standings, but he was 126 points back of eventual champion Scott Dixon. Whoa, that is a big, big gap from 33 points back to 126. Near 100 point gap. Where did that go? Let's move on to 2021. They managed to win 3 races that year. A big gap from 2020 and an extra win over 2019. However, all 3 were from Colton Herta. So Rossi still didn't win. And, Rossi still didn't win. Hunter-Reay couldn't win. And James Hinchcliffe at the time couldn't win. They finished P5 and P10 in points. So they go from having 3 out of their 5 inside the top 10 in points to now only 2. And while they managed to close the gap a decent chunk, they still fell 2 spots below their best, which is 3rd, and they were still about 94 points behind the cut line, behind the eventual champion, which that year was Alex Palou. Still not really championship contention, even though Herta won the last 2 races of the season. Now let's move on to last year. And really last year is when I noticed that something's going on with Andretti Autosport. They managed to win twice, one with Rossi and one with Herta, but they only managed to finish P9 and P10 in the points. So no drivers in the top 5, and they barely hung on to the top 10 in points with 2 of their drivers. You had newcomer Romain Grosjean, who did nothing, and you had newcomer Delvin DeFrancesco, who was just a paid driver. He's done nothing ever since he's gotten into IndyCar. And their P9 finished their best, which was Rossi, which Rossi did manage to break a 3-year winless streak. So that's something to note. But he was still 179 points back of the eventual champion Will Power. So we're about 3 years shy of an Andretti Autosport driver being a real championship contender. And we've really gone shy of them even being a top 5 points contender. Now we move on to 2023, and we're still 7 races in. There's still plenty of season left to go. But as of now, the team only has 1 win. Kyle Kirkwood, I believe it was at Long Beach. And their best driver in the points, which is Colton Herta, is 9. So not even their winner, Kirkwood, is in the top 10 in points. I believe he's around 12th or 11th. And Herta's 124 points behind the points leader, which is Alex Below. So the key here, yes, the wins have been, coming few and far between. You can say that, well, they're still winning consistently, at least, so that's fine, right? But look at the points back from the championship year to year to year. I mean, to go from 33 to 126 is a massive gap, even for a pandemic year. And to be 3 out of the 5 years over 100 points behind the champion, that's bad. For a team like Andretti Autosport, which we consider a top team, that's bad. And look, they're still used to the average, multiple win a year. I mean, I'm not denying that. I mean, I just read the stats. 2 wins, 1 win, 3 wins, 2 win, and a win. But still, only 4 out of the 5 years, they only managed to win 2 races a year. And even then, with a lot of these wins, it's only coming from 1 driver, at the most 2. 2019, only Rossi won. Again, if you want to count the 88 car, which is a satellite team, then you could say 2. The 2020, 1 winner. 2021, 1 winner. 2022, you have 2 winners, but they only won 1 apiece. And then 2023, there's only 1 winner so far. And look, let's talk about some of the drivers. Romain Grosjean, I'm sorry, he's been a non-factor. Yes, he's had a couple podiums here and there. Yes, he probably should have a couple wins. Like, he should have won probably St. Pete. He probably should have won Barber this year, but would have, could have, should have. At the end of the day, how many times are you going to go off of, I should have won, and when are we going to start asking, why haven't you won? If you should have won, then you should have had at least 1 win by now, but he still has 0. I mean, Rinus VeeKay has won more than Romain Grosjean, and a worse Ed Carpenter car, at least what should be a worse Ed Carpenter car. And he hasn't. Kyle Kirkwood, who has been with Andretti only for 1 season compared to Grosjean's 2. He's already won more races with Andretti than Grosjean. So Grosjean, he's really been a non-factor. He hasn't even finished top 10 in points with Andretti so far. He hasn't even finished top 10 in points. He hasn't even been close. He might get it this year. He's 11th, but he really hasn't been close to being a top 10 contender for the point standings. But really, the downfall can be seen, really with any organization, with their best driver. You saw that with Ferrari in 2020 with Leclerc. You saw that with Kevin Harvick at SHR for the past couple of years. And you can see that with Colton Herta. I mean, from 2019 to 2021, he was top 5 in points. From 2022 to 23, he's barely clinging on to the top 10. Last year, he finished 10th. And for the large part of the season, he was outside the top 10 in points. And folks, Herta has had no wins and no podiums this year. He's had a goose egg in basically every statistical category. I don't even know if he's led any laps this year. And I'm being frankly honest. I don't even know if he's led any laps. So, what is Andretti's problem? Because you heard me read the numbers. What is Andretti's problem? In my opinion, I think it's too many cars. Look, Andretti for a lot of times have had 4 to 5 full-time cars. Think of the 26, the 27, the 28, the 29, or the 98, or the 88, you name it. They usually have anywhere from 4 to 5 cars, and then sometimes another part-time car. So they can have anywhere from 4 to 6 cars. But I read you the numbers. Most of the time, half of those cars are non-factors. I mean, folks, let's be honest here. Was Zach Veach ever a contender? No. Is Delvin DeFrancesco a contender? No. Is Romain Grosjean, as much as it hurts to say, a contender? No. So why do they have so many cars if most of them aren't doing anything? I mean, folks, let's be honest here. Yes, Delvin DeFrancesco, he's a paid driver. We know why he's in that seat. He's a paid driver. But if you expect a paid driver, the excuse is, oh, they're bringing funding to the team. Well, I expect the funding to show in better results. And I just read the stats. I'm not going to read them again, but I read the stats. It's not doing anything. The team is getting worse. So the money's not doing anything. So DeFrancesco just riding around just to have a good time. I mean, yeah, if you're on the lower, if you're like an AJ Foyt, if you're a Dale Coyne, I guess that's good. But if you're a team like Andretti, which has championship aspirations, you can't accept this. Like if Grosjean doesn't win this year, you have to take in consideration, does he really should stay in that seat? So what's the fix for Andretti Autosport? To me, I think they got to downsize. Look what Penske did. They downsized. They were a 4-car team. They moved to a 3-car team, and now they're more competitive. Even Ganassi, they moved from a 4-car team to a 3-car team, and guess what? They're more competitive. I mean, look how long it took McLaren to move up to 3 full-time cars. It took them till this year, and they've been in the sport in some capacity since 2020. Look, it looks like for IndyCar, the whole 4-5-car full-time team era is starting to come to a close. Again, Penske, they're downsizing. Ganassi, they're downsizing. It took McLaren multiple years just to upsize. And I guarantee if they didn't get Rossi, they probably would have stayed at 2 cars. I think it's time for Andretti to downsize. They got to cut one of these cars. Now, they already did downsize this year. They only have 4 full-time cars this year compared to 5. But in my opinion, I think they need to go down to 3. I just personally think so. Who would you get rid of? Because you're not going to get rid of Colton Herta. You're not going to get rid of Kyle Kirkwood. You're probably not going to get rid of Romain Grosjean because he does score a couple podiums throughout the year. Get rid of Delvin DeFrancesco. Get rid of the 29 car. I just think so. Sell off that chassis. Make a little bit extra money off of that, and then pour that into the program. Have all your engineers, all your resources dedicated to those 3 cars and making those 3 cars competitive. That's where IndyCar is heading. Again, the super teams, they're downsizing. Again, 3 full-time cars at the max. I think Andretti needs to do the same thing. The 29 car has been irrelevant for the past 5-6 years, and it's not going anywhere. I think they just got to downsize to 3 cars, focus on the 28, focus on the 26, and focus on the 27. Focus on those 3 cars and getting them better and back to championship pedigree. They have too many cars, in my opinion, and I think if they downsize, they can focus more on those other cars. But, I mean, I just read the stats. They're going downhill, and not a lot of people are talking about it. And pretty soon, I guarantee you there's going to be some conversation out there by a big IndyCar outlet saying, wait a minute, where's Andretti? But it's been in front of us the entire time, really for the past 4 to 5 years. All right, so I think it's fair to say that NASCAR's endeavor to Le Mans has been a success. I think it's fair to say. Well, let's briefly talk about the on-track reasons. They were very competitive. They were faster by the second by most of the GTE cars. And they ran as high as 28th in the race. And had they not had some issues where they had to go behind the garage for nearly an hour, they probably would have finished probably in the high 30s or in the low 20s. Again, a big, heavy stock car. Granted, it was 500 pounds lighter, but I guarantee it was still way heavier than all the other sports cars. Was seconds faster than probably half of the field. Yeah. And they still finished, I believe, 38th or 39th overall. A massive props to all the engineering staff who worked on the Garage 56 entry. That's just from the on-track success. What about the off-track success? Because you might be thinking, well, what off-track success? Because I think that it's time for us NASCAR fans to understand something. The sport is changing. Look, we can complain about the playoff system, the cars, how they drive, the schedule, all of that. We could talk about going back to the old days as much as we want, but at the end of the day, folks, there's only one way for any business really to evolve or improve, and that's to move ahead, not to look in the past, but to move ahead. Yes, you can still have your core values in terms of a business or anything, you know, that you developed in the past, but you need to learn to evolve in order to, because that's how you're gonna, move on in the world. That's how you're going to improve. Like, let's be honest here, folks. Do you really think that if NASCAR said we're gonna go to the Gen 4, we're gonna get rid of the playoffs, we're gonna go back to the Winston Cup Series, do you really think it would survive in 2023 and onwards? Yeah, you might make a lot of fans happy, but I guarantee you NASCAR would still be in the same place. Now, could NASCAR do some things differently like they did in the past? Absolutely. But I really think with this Garage 56 entry that we're seeing that NASCAR is starting to, talk international. And international, like it or not, folks, because look, there are people out there who complain when NASCARs go to the West Coast, like Portland, for example, or the LA Coliseum. There are people who complain about that. Or, well, why we race the championship finale at Phoenix, even though I'm one of them. But, anyways, international is starting to become the future of sports. You don't believe me? The NFL, every single year, they continue to add more international events. My Indianapolis Colts are going to be playing, I believe it's the Patriots in Germany this year or in London. They're going to be international regardless. Soccer, an international sport, is starting to make its presence now in the United States. You want to know how? Lionel Messi is coming to my hometown in Miami, and I'm not a soccer guy, but I understand how massive of a deal that is. I mean, look at the NBA. I mean, you just got Jokic from Siberia, who just won the championship. So you have NBA's getting very international. Baseball, the World Baseball Championship. I mean, you got, I believe it's the Japanese guy. I forgot his name, but he signed, I believe it's with the Angels, and he could sell out stadiums just on his own. He could sell ballparks just on his own. So sports are going international. I mean, even F1, they're an international sport, and they have quickly risen up the ranks in the United States in terms of popularity in sports. So it looks like NASCARs understand that because look, they made a big impression at Le Mans in their competitiveness. And look, you saw a lot of fans and a lot of racing fans out there basically like, hey, what's this NASCAR doing in Le Mans? And they got a lot of publicity, whether it's from, the fact that the stock car looks so much bigger and girthier than all the other sports cars, or just, all the videos that I see on TikTok with the Garage 56 car just trailing through all the other GT cars. I mean, folks, NASCAR's probably gotten its most international attention in this race alone than it has probably in the last 20 years. That's the truth. And like I mentioned, international is the way sports are going. Sports are going global, especially American sports. Again, the NFL, probably the most American sport in the world, they're going international. So I think NASCAR's following suit, and they're already starting to plant the seeds. They already planted the seeds with Garage 56, but now, look, there's been talks with NASCAR executives that they're hoping that this, entry can help open the door for new manufacturers. And to all the people out there who still complain about Toyota, your damn cheap Toyotas, or who would have a problem with like a Nissan or a Hyundai or a Kia or a Honda, foreign manufacturers coming into the sport and are saying, you need to get Dodge back. They already tried. Dodge doesn't want to come back. It's that plain and simple. So get off the high horse that you're thinking Dodge is coming back, because right now it doesn't look like that's happening. And if you really don't want another manufacturer because it's not, I'm not saying there's a problem being patriotic. You can be patriotic. I'm pretty patriotic myself. But if you're going to have a problem with, NASCAR going international or, them trying to bring new manufacturers, that are outside the United States, I don't know what to tell you. You're just stuck in the past. There's no way to say it because, again, sports are going international. If the sports world wants to evolve, they need to keep up with the times because at the end of the day, it's all a copycat. Sports are a copycat business. They want to copy what's best of the other. You don't believe me? Just look at how NASCAR's been handling their social media. They basically copy Formula One nowadays. They just sprinkle some different things. It's a copycat sport or it's a copycat business. And there's nothing wrong with it. If it works, why not take advantage of it? That's what the people want. That's what NASCAR should go for. And right now, what fans want is more global sports. I mean, just another example is golfing is a PGA and the Live Golf Series. They just merged. Global sports are the future. That is what sports are telling us right now. And again, NASCAR knows this. Do you really think there's, NASCAR is just going to go over to Canada if we go race at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve for no reason? Just, oh, we like the track? No. They understand that sports are going global, that they need to evolve. It's probably not going to do well in terms of the team's pockets, but if these global endeavors that NASCAR is going on can bring in another manufacturer or two, that's more money that's going into the teams. That's more money that's coming into the sport. More money to the sport means that the sport's going to get bigger. And we constantly complain about how there's too many paid drivers in the sport. You bring more manufacturers, you bring more money, you don't have to worry about that much anymore. Because then the manufacturers and the teams can handpick their own talent because they already have the money. They don't need the other teams to basically, or other drivers to basically be self-working fundraisers, if you will. So Garage 56 opened up a lot of questions, and it's where NASCAR goes next. And in my opinion, I think they're going international. They've already made talks about, maybe Middle East, maybe Asia, maybe European races. I don't know if they'd go necessarily that far in terms of like Middle East or, maybe Australia or Asia, but I could see a European race down the road. I could see NASCAR going up and down the border more often in the future. I mean, Canada might be on the schedule next year in terms of the Cup Series, but that's where the sports world is heading. It's heading global. Again, look at the NFL, look at soccer, look at the NBA, look at baseball, look at Formula One. If NASCAR wants to keep up with the growing sports market, they need to evolve as well. And right now, the sports market, it's evolving to global. And look, NASCAR's already done the first step with Le Mans. Next step, maybe get some manufacturers, get some international races on the schedule. If it succeeds, I mean, if Le Mans tells us anything, it should succeed. And if it does, I think NASCAR will be set for many years down the road. And that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed listening. Thank you guys so much for tuning in as always. If you guys want to listen to all previous episodes of the Motorsport Ministry, you can find us on all major platforms, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, Amazon, iTunes, and iHeartRadio as well. And of course, YouTube. If you guys want to follow me on my social medias, you can follow me on Twitter and TikTok at Motor Minister. Those handles are linked in the description of every episode. But thank you guys so much for tuning in as always, and we will see you in the next one.